In December of 2024, Kyren Lacy was involved in a fatal car crash that claimed the life of a 78-year-old veteran running an errand with his wife. The victim's family did not take this lying down and came after him, guns blazing.
No one is above the law. I don't care if you're a football player or anyone. No one is above the law.
And just when the scales of justice were about to weigh in, another life was cut short, young Kyren's. The tragic news came at a very unique point in the legal battle concerning the accident. But for those wondering if this is the end, the victim's family has this to say.
I'm confident there will be justice, but no, I won't stop.
In this video, we'll be showing you the Hall's family's surprising reaction following the tragic death. An unexpected response. The news of Lacy's death on April 12, 2025, came as a shock for the Hall family, adding an unexpected twist to what had already been a devastating 4 months since Herman's passing. Their gracious statement expressing sympathy to the Lacy family revealed a remarkable capacity for compassion even in their own grief. Our family understands how painful it is to lose someone you love, and we extend our deepest sympathy to his family, they wrote, acknowledging the universal nature of loss that now connected the two families in an unexpected way. This response was particularly noteworthy, given Heather Dickerson's earlier statements about seeking justice for her father. Throughout January and February 2025, she had been vocal about her determination to see accountability for Herman's death.
I'm confident there will be justice, but no, I won't stop.
No matter who it is?
No, I don't care who it is. No, I mean, they wouldn't. If the tables were turned, you know, if it were them, they wouldn't stop.
Now, with Lacy's death, the legal path to justice had abruptly closed. The grand jury hearing scheduled for April 14, 2025 would not take place, at least not with Lacy as its subject. The Hall family would need to find closure through other means. In many ways, this represented a profound loss for the family. They had been actively engaging with the legal process, preparing for what they hoped would be progress toward holding someone accountable for Herman's death. Now, that process had been short-circuited by Lacy's death, leaving them with unresolved questions and without the closure they had been seeking through the courts. Yet their compassionate response to the Lacy family's loss suggested a recognition that grief transcends the hostile nature of the legal system. For the Lacy family, the grief of losing Kyren was compounded by the shocking circumstances of his death. The police account of his final hours, a verbal altercation with a family member, the discharge of a firearm, the flight from authorities, and ultimately the self-inflicted gunshot wound painted a picture of a young man in profound distress. The pending legal case and its potential impact on his future had likely contributed to his state of mind, though the full complexity of his mental health struggles would remain known only to him. The impact of Kyren Lacy's death reverberated far beyond his immediate family. Former teammates, coaches, and the broader LSU community mourned the loss of a young man who had been a standout on the field, and according to many tributes, a positive presence off it as well. LSU's athletic department issued a statement expressing condolences to Lacy's family, teammates, and coaches, acknowledging the impact of his loss on the university community. In Thibodaux, the community continued to grapple with the loss of two of its own. Herman Hall had been a beloved figure, known for his gardening, his daily 28-mile bike rides, and his storytelling. As a Vietnam veteran who had served 2 tours and a retired customs officer with 36 years of service, he embodied qualities of duty, diligence, and dedication to family and community.
He was a wonderful man. You know, he was a retired Marine. He served his country, retired from the Marine Corps, retired from the Sheriff's Department. So he literally spent his lifetime fighting for justice for all of us.
Kyren Lacy, meanwhile, had been a hometown athletic hero, a homegrown Bayou boy who had risen from Thibodaux High School to LSU and to the brink of an NFL career. His talent on the football field had been a source of pride for the community, with his success symbolizing the potential for local youth to achieve greatness on a national stage. Public reaction to the dual tragedies revealed a community struggling to come to terms with the complex moral and emotional dimensions of the situation. Some focused primarily on Herman Hall's death and the impact on his family, emphasizing the importance of accountability for reckless driving. Others concentrated more on Kyren Lacy's mental health struggles and the pressures he faced, calling for greater awareness and support for those dealing with invisible battles. For both families, the challenge in the weeks and months ahead would be to find a path forward through grief while honoring the memories of their loved ones. For the Hall family, this meant continuing to celebrate Herman's life and legacy, his service to his country, his dedication to his family, his contributions to his community. Though the legal pursuit of justice had ended, their commitment to keeping his memory alive remained steadfast. For the Lacy family, the path forward was perhaps even more more complex. They face not only the grief of losing their son, but also the complicated circumstances of his death and the unresolved questions about his role in the December crash. The broader Thibodaux community, meanwhile, found itself navigating the difficult terrain of collective grief. Many residents had connections to both families or knew them through the small-town networks of schools, churches, and community organizations. The dual losses represented a profound challenge for a community already struggling with the usual stresses of daily life. Questions about equity in the legal system also remained relevant. Heather Dickerson's concerns about whether Lacy would receive preferential treatment because of his status as a high-profile athlete had resonated with many who perceived inequities in how justice is administered. Though the legal case ended with Lacy's death, the broader questions about fairness and accountability in the legal system remained relevant. The Thibodaux community, meanwhile, continued to support both families in their grief while reflecting on the lessons to be drawn from this dual tragedy. In the final analysis, the story of Herman Hall and Kyren Lacy is a deeply human one. It reminds us of the fragility of human existence and the unexpected ways in which our lives can intersect with others. As Heather Dickerson observed in the wake of her father's death,
Tomorrow's never promised. You never know when your last day, your last breath will be.
in this shared truth perhaps lay the seeds of understanding that might eventually allow both families to move forward, not forgetting their losses. For as both families had now experienced firsthand, tomorrow is indeed never promised, making the manner in which we live each day all the more significant. While the world continues its forward motion, both families remain suspended in the peculiar timelessness of grief, all brought about by the unfortunate incident that took place in December 2024. A not-so-merry Christmas. On December 17, 2024, a fateful collision occurred on Louisiana Highway 20 in Chack Bay, near Thibodaux, Louisiana. The seemingly routine day would forever change the lives of two families from the same community, linking them through tragedy in ways neither could have anticipated. According to the Louisiana State Police, Kyren Lacy, the 24-year-old former LSU wide receiver with NFL aspirations, was driving a 2023 Dodge Charger at excessive speeds, passing multiple vehicles in a no-passing zone. As Lacy's vehicle recklessly crossed the center line on Highway 20, it triggered a catastrophic chain reaction that would claim the life of 78-year-old Herman Hall, a beloved Vietnam veteran and family man. The sequence of events was as chaotic as it was devastating. As Lacy's Charger bore down on oncoming traffic, a northbound pickup truck was forced to swerve drastically to avoid a head-on collision. Behind that truck, a Kia Cadenza also swerved Lee in an attempt to avoid disaster, but crossed into the opposite lane and collided head-on with a southbound Kia Sorento. Inside that Sorento were Herman Hall and his wife, both of whom were wearing seatbelts as they returned from running routine errands. Instead of stopping to render aid or call emergency services, authorities alleged that Lacy simply drove around the crash scene and fled south on LA Highway 20. Meanwhile, as the wreckage smoldered on the highway, Herman Hall's daughter, Heather Dickerson, would receive the kind of phone call every child dreads. Her parents had been in a serious accident.
She said, "We just got in a wreck." I said, "You just got in a wreck? What are you talking about?" She said, "Yeah, we got in a head-on collision. The car's totaled." And I was like, "Are you okay?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, I'm fine." She's like, "My chest hurts, but maybe it's from the seatbelt or the airbag."
Initially, the gravity of the situation wasn't fully clear. Dickerson's mother, in shock from the collision, downplayed her husband's injuries during that first frantic call. What seemed at first like minor complaints of back pain would quickly escalate to a life-threatening emergency, with paramedics making the decision to airlift Herman Hall to University Medical Center in New Orleans.
And I was like, "Okay, well, how's Dad?" And she said, "Well, he's fine. He's complaining that his back hurts." So then she calls me back. And she said, "Hey, they're gonna airlift your dad to UMC." I was like, "Wait, what?"
The severity of Herman Hall's injuries wouldn't become fully apparent until doctors at the hospital began fighting to save his life. His internal injuries were very serious. His intestines had been lacerated in the violent impact, requiring massive blood transfusions as medical teams worked desperately to repair the damage. Despite their best efforts, the trauma was simply too severe for the 78-year-old Vietnam veteran's body to withstand. In a heartbreaking moment recounted by his daughter, doctors emerged from surgery with the devastating news. The doctors walk out with their heads down. "He said your dad didn't make it. I thought he made it out of surgery and he said his heart gave out. We gave him gallons of blood because his intestines were lacerated. His heart stopped and finally gave out." Just like that, Herman Hall, father, grandfather, veteran, gardener, cyclist, storyteller, was gone. claimed by injuries sustained in a crash that police would later allege was entirely preventable. His death, occurring just 8 days before Christmas, would leave a gaping hole in his family during what should have been a festive season. While the Hall family began the painful process of grieving their loved one, the investigation into the crash was gaining momentum. State police discovered surveillance footage from a nearby business that captured Lacy's Dodge Charger at the scene, providing critical evidence for their investigation. The footage apparently showed not only Lacy's reckless driving prior to the crash, but also his decision to leave the scene without stopping to help the injured victims. The emerging details painted a disturbing picture of a young athlete who, despite his bright future and the privileges afforded by his talent, allegedly chose to flee from the consequences of his actions. This apparent callousness stood in stark contrast to the public image of Kyren Lacy, the hometown hero. Lacy's rise to prominence had been meteoric. He had distinguished himself as a standout receiver at Thibodeau High School. As a senior, he had racked up 54 receptions for 864 yards and 18 touchdowns, earning recognition as the 10th ranked wide receiver in Louisiana for the 2020 class. This impressive performance had earned him a scholarship to the University of Louisiana at Lafayette, where he continued to excel. During his 5-year collegiate career, split between UL Lafayette and LSU, Lacy amassed impressive statistics: 162 receptions, 2,360 yards, and 26 touchdowns. His final season at LSU had been particularly strong, with 58 receptions, 866 yards, and 9 touchdowns, establishing him as the team's leader in touchdown receptions. This stellar performance had placed him on the radar of NFL scouts, with ESPN's Mel Kiper Jr. ranking him as high as the number 1 6th receiver prospect for the 2025 NFL Draft in December 2024. Just 2 days after the fatal crash on December 19, 2024, Lacy had formally declared for the 2025 NFL Draft, seemingly unbothered by the tragedy that had occurred. This decision, made while Herman Hall was still being mourned by his family, would later be cited by critics as evidence of callousness, though Lacy's defenders would argue that he was operating under the belief that he was not at fault for the accident. As Christmas came and went, the Hall family grieved their loss while the investigation into the crash continued. By early January 2025, Louisiana State Police had gathered enough evidence to issue an arrest warrant for Kyren Lacy. The charges were serious: negligent homicide, felony hit and run with death, and reckless operation of a vehicle. The contrast between the two men, Herman Hall and Kyren Lacy, could hardly have been more stark. Hall was a Vietnam War veteran who had served 2 tours, worked 36 years in customs before retiring, and was known for his love of gardening, cycling 28 miles daily, and storytelling. At 78, he was enjoying his golden years with his wife, children, and grandchildren, embodying the values of service, hard work, and family.
He loved to garden. He loved to ride his bike. He used to ride his bike like 28 miles a day. I don't know, he just told great stories. He loved his family, he loved his friends.
Lacy, on the other hand, was a young man at the beginning of his journey, with a promising career in professional football seemingly within his grasp. At 24, he represented potential, talent, and the possibility of greatness, all of which would be called into question by the events of December 17, 2024, and their aftermath. As January 2025 unfolded, the Hall family began speaking out about their loss and their desire for accountability. Heather Dickerson, in particular, emerged as the family's voice, sharing memories of her father while expressing frustration that the person responsible for his death remained free. She emphasized that the family wanted to see justice served, regardless of the alleged perpetrator's status or connection.
I'm confident there will be justice, but no, I won't stop.
No matter who it is.
No, I don't care who it is. No, I mean, they wouldn't. If the tables were turned, if it were them, they wouldn't stop.
Dickerson expressed particular concern that Lacy's status as a well-known athlete might lead to preferential treatment in the legal system. They need to have consequences. I don't want it to be swept under the rug because of who they may or may not be and who they know. We all know that happens. We will make sure there is justice some way. Her concerns reflected a broader skepticism about equal justice, particularly when celebrities or athletes are involved in legal troubles. The Hall family's push for accountability would soon lead to developments in the case, as Lacy's legal team negotiated the terms of his surrender to authorities. Although Lacy turned himself in January, the narrative soon became more complex after posted bond. A family's quest for justice. The beginning of 2025 brought not just a new year, but new developments in the case that had forever altered the trajectories of the Hall and Lacy families. On January 12, 2025, nearly a month after the fatal crash, Kyren Lacy turned himself into authorities. He was booked into the Lafourche Parish Correctional Complex on the charges that had been outlined in the warrant: negligent homicide, felony hit and run, and reckless operation of a vehicle.
We were prepared for that. We knew he was going to turn himself in. The charges that were put on him were right in line with what we expected them to be.
The severity of these charges reflected the gravity of the allegations against Lacy. Negligent homicide, a charge brought in cases where a death results from criminal negligence, carried with it the potential for significant prison time. The felony hit and run charge stemmed from allegations that Lacy had failed to stop and render aid following the crash, while the reckless operation charge addressed the alleged dangerous driving behavior that had led to the fatal collision. Despite the serious nature of the charges, Lacy was released after posting a $151,000 bond. As reported by ESPN and other sources, this release allowed him to return to his normal activities while awaiting further legal proceedings. For many observers, including the Hall family, this represented the first test of whether Lacy's status as a beloved athlete would influence the course of justice. As the calendar turned from January to February 2025, the legal case surrounding the tragic death of Herman Hall began to grow increasingly complex. On February 2nd, 2025, Kyren Lacy's attorney, Matthew Ory, released a public statement that directly challenged the police account of the December 17th crash. According to Ory's account, the crash that claimed Herman Hall's life unfolded very differently than the police had alleged. The defense attorney asserted that Lacy was driving on a road with 2 lanes in each direction and had only briefly passed other vehicles before safely re-entering his lane. He emphasized that Lacy's Dodge Charger never struck any other vehicle, including the Kia Sorento carrying Herman Hall and his wife. Perhaps most significantly, Ory claimed that the vehicle that actually collided with Hall's had been issued a citation, suggesting that fault for the crash lay elsewhere. According to this version of events, after the collision occurred in front of him, Lacy had cautiously driven around the crash scene only when it was safe to do so, not in a reckless attempt to flee the scene as police had alleged. Ory further disputed suggestions that alcohol or drugs had played any role in the incident. He also addressed criticism of Lacy's decision to continue with his normal activities, such as posting about his graduation and training in the days following the crash. According to the attorney, these actions reflected Lacy's genuine belief that he was not at fault for the accident, rather than callousness toward the tragedy. In a strong conclusion to his statement, Ory characterized his client as an exemplary community member and teammate. He urged the public not to rush to judgment and expressed confidence that further investigation would ultimately vindicate Lacy. Meanwhile, the Hall family continued to mourn their loss while advocating for accountability. For them, the pain of Herman's absence was compounded by what they perceived as a lack of remorse from the person they believed responsible for his death. Heather Dickerson, in particular, remained steadfast in her commitment to seeing justice served for her father.
For someone to cause an accident like that and just keep going like it didn't matter, some just stupidity. Honestly, how can you be in that much of a hurry?
As the legal process inched forward, both sides prepared for what promised to be a contentious court battle. By mid-March 2025, a grand jury hearing had been scheduled for April 14, 2025, to determine whether there was sufficient evidence to indict Lacy on the charges filed against him. This procedural step would be critical in determining whether the case would move forward to trial. Throughout this period, Lacy maintained his innocence while continuing to prepare for the NFL draft. He participated in LSU's Pro Day in March 2025, showcasing his athletic skills for NFL scouts. Despite the legal cloud hanging over him, his prospects still appeared promising, though his draft stock had fallen somewhat since December. While he had been ranked as high as the number 6 receiver prospect by ESPN's Mel Kiper Jr. in December 2024, he was no longer in Kiper's top 10 by March 2025. As April 2025 approached, the tension surrounding the case continued to build. The Hall family prepared for what they hoped would be progress in holding Kyren Lacy accountable for Herman's death. Lacy and his legal team, meanwhile, remained confident that the evidence would support their version of events and lead to a declination of charges. But on April 12, 2025, just 2 days before the scheduled grand jury hearing, events took an unexpected and tragic turn. Reports began to emerge that Kyren Lacy had been found dead in Houston, Texas, following a police chase. The news of Lacy's death sent shocks through multiple communities: the sports world, LSU, his hometown of Thibodaux, and certainly the Hall family. For Herman Hall's family, the sudden death of the man they believed responsible for their loved one's passing created a complex emotional situation. While they had been focused on seeking justice through the legal system, that path was now abruptly closed. Lacy's death effectively ended the criminal case against him, as criminal charges cannot be pursued posthumously. The grand jury hearing scheduled for April 14, 2025 would no longer take place, at least not with Lacy as its subject. This sudden termination of the legal process left the Hall family without the closure they had been seeking through the courts. In the immediate aftermath of Lacy's death, his attorney Matthew Ory released a statement expressing profound sorrow, while also criticizing the police investigation. Ory characterized the investigation as an overzealous, targeted effort and a witch hunt fueled by Lacy's public profile. He maintained that the evidence would have led to a declination of charges had the case proceeded, and called for a transparent review of the investigation's conduct. As the news of Lacy's death spread, former teammates and coaches began sharing tributes on social media. NFL quarterback Kyler Murray was among those who expressed condolences, acknowledging the tragedy's impact on both Lacy's loved ones and the Hall family. These tributes painted a picture of a young man who had been well liked and respected in athletic circles, contrasting sharply with the allegations of recklessness and callousness that had emerged after the December crash. Fans and community members also took to social media to share their shock and sadness, with many calling for greater attention to mental health resources, especially for young athletes under pressure. The sudden loss of a promising young talent like Lacy served as a sobering reminder of the and invisible struggles individuals may face, even those who appear successful and confident on the surface. On social media platform X, formerly Twitter, some users expressed sympathy for both families, acknowledging the dual tragedy of Herman Hall's death in the crash and Kyren Lacy's death during a police chase. Others focused more on one aspect or the other, either emphasizing Hall's loss and the impact on his family, or highlighting Lacy's mental health struggles and the pressures he faced. One X user expressed sympathy for Hall's daughter, noting the lost chance for justice. The dual tragedies, Herman Hall's death in the December crash and Kyren Lacy's death in April, highlighted several broader issues. The dangers of reckless driving on Louisiana's rural highways became a talking point, with some commentators noting the particular hazards on two-lane roads with no shoulders, especially during sugarcane harvest season when large trucks frequently use these routes. Questions about accountability in the legal system, especially when celebrities or athletes are involved, also remained at the forefront of discussions. The abrupt end to the legal proceedings left many questions unanswered. The conflicting narratives about the December crash, the police version alleging Lacy's responsibility versus the defense team's insistence on his innocence, would never be fully adjudicated in court. The truth of what happened on Highway 20 that fateful December day might never be definitively established, at least not in a legal forum. This lack of resolution would cast a long shadow over both families and the broader community. For the Lacy family, the allegations against their son would never be definitively proven or disproven in court. The uncertainty would remain, even as they mourned his loss and tried to make sense of his final actions. Kenny Lacy's focus on mental health awareness suggested a desire to find meaning in tragedy, to use his son's story to help others who might be struggling silently. However, amidst the outpouring of sadness over Lacy's death and uncertainties surrounding what would become of the legal proceedings, a question lingered. Would the Hall family ever get justice for the death of their patriarch? If you enjoyed this video, click on the videos on your screen for more.